Good morning, guys. So today I'm going to continue on with kind of the series of big life changing events that happened for me, and in kind of just following chronologically, today we get to uh, essentially the darkest period of my life, the worst depression I've ever had and experienced, and kind of that process and that experience, and ultimately how that changed my life and how I came out of it and the path that set me on. So it's not quite as a defined moment, so I'm going to just try to tell the story. In essence, post Shambhala, I had made a bunch of friends, and a bunch of them lived in Vancouver. And I basically decided I was going to move to Vancouver. There's other elements of the story, but I moved to Vancouver, start setting up my life, um, end up working a job I really didn't like. Hate is a strong word, but it was good for a little bit, and then it got pretty soul crushing. In essence, I was on a marketing team, and we were selling credit cards, so signing people up for credit cards. And we were good at it, which is conflicting because it's like we were good at our job as a team. I was good at it, but it didn't feel great. Like what we were doing didn't feel great. Like, selling people into credit cards that they really didn't need. And at the time, I was someone who had no credit cards because all my credit cards had gone into collections, and I had a bunch of debt in collections, and I couldn't have a credit card because I had no credit for anyone to give me a credit card. And so it was an interesting situation, but for kind of when I first moved to the city, it was my main gig that supported me just to live, to pay rent, to put food on the table. But I think after my second Shambhala, no, so I think before, I don't think I made it a full year. I think I hit a point where I just needed something else. I ended up finding another job before I quit, which was uncharacteristic of me. In my past, I would just quit and figure it out. But this time, at least I had the sense to find a job before I left. Found a job working in a kitchen. I really love cooking and food, and at the time I had done some personal chef work when I lived in LA. But I had avoided kitchens for the most part because I actually love cooking, and I didn't want that to be destroyed by working in a restaurant or kitchen. But this was fine. I actually ended up learning a lot. It's where I really learned proper knife skills for the first time. Then that's carried on. So I'm actually really grateful for that thing, in essence, is that it gave me some better cooking skills. And as I was doing this cooking job, I was also building a business on the back end, which was actually a personal chef company. And everything kind of culminated where I think just before Shambhala, I had got one client, maybe two, with my personal chef job, and my personal chef business and my job. There was some conflict, ended up getting fired. Went to Shambhala kind of like shit, like got fired from my job, but I had just picked up a few clients who were paying money. Shambhala is as craziness as it is. Came back like, okay, I'm gonna jump into this business. It's like I don't have a choice, so I went in, got more clients, got to the place where I had replaced my income, and this was the first time in my whole business career that not only did a business make some real money, but I was I was making a livable income. It was a service based business, which was great because I was actually making money as opposed to the business I just shut down recently, which was a product based, where the money coming in doesn't necessarily reflect how much profit. Where at least with the service based business, after cost of goods, which was actually dealt with separately, just how I structured it, the money that I got paid was for my service. So it was essentially, other than, other some expenses, it was mostly profit. So all of a sudden I'm living this, my dream, essentially. I'm living this high of, for the first time in probably about 5 years at that point, 5 years. A business is making money and supporting my lifestyle, and I'm kind of living this dream. And then clients started to fall off, new clients weren't coming in, and all of a sudden I found myself with no clients, no job, no money, and basically not being able to support myself, not pay any bills. All the meanwhile, in the background, what was going on is I was struggling with a major sugar addiction, a binge eating problem, and the binge eating came out of for lack of a better word, a self-love problem, and kind of a self-hate, a self-punishment. I don't know where it stemmed from, honestly, but just got in this cycle of, essentially, the binge eating was an act of punishing myself, where I think I was trying to live up to this perfection of perfect diet and following it to a T. And if I cracked, so for example, this is what always happened, is like I'd have one cookie, right? And because I had one cookie, I fucked up my diet. And because I fucked it up, well, I might as well eat like everything I could want in the next, before I go to bed, because I'm never going to have the opportunity to eat this stuff again, because tomorrow I'm going to go back to my perfect diet. But again, it was twisted, it was dark, because it wasn't just, eat in pleasure. It's like that's how it began, is like, ooh, I want the cookie, and then it's like, well, I fucked up, so I might as well have a box of cookies and 10 chocolate bars and go for McDonald's, and then even when I didn't feel good, then it became about the punishment side would kick in. Then it'd be like, well, I should just eat more because I'm a bag of shit, and if I feel like shit, I won't do this again. And then that became the cycle. And that lasted for the better part of a year. Like, there was, inside of that, there was ups and downs, hills and valleys. So times where it was better, times where it was worse. But I kind of had this every 7 to 10 day binge eating cycle. And sometimes it was, again, not so terrible. And sometimes it was super terrible. Whereas like the real punishment, self-hate kind of avenue was open. And that, because I was running in the background, as my life went from this high of running my own business, providing my own income, to zero, like falling off of that mountain, this thing in the background just got worse and worse and worse, until it all kind of hit the point where I was, like I said, unemployed, had no money coming in. My parents were literally giving me money every month just to support myself, to pay rent, to buy groceries. I've said it in other videos. One of the things that gets me the most emotional is I couldn't even buy cat food for my cat. And that's not the worst of it, because the worst of it is, even in that broke state of being so broke, I would scrounge up my change, my dimes, my nickels, my quarters, depending on how broke I was, and I would go to the store, the closest grocery store, and typically buy 5 to 10 chocolate bars, which then I would consume in a single sitting until I got so sick that I wouldn't be able to eat anymore. And so not only was I this level of broke where I needed financial support, but I was also using the only little bit of money I had to feed the addiction and the self punishment. And so I got into this really dark place where I just, all the tools I had, I wasn't able to turn myself around. I kept feeling like things were getting worse. I didn't have a compelling future to even pull me through. So it's like the the present was fucking terrible and the future seemed worse. Um, at least the most sense I had is I was just trying lots of things. I was trying to figure it out. Ultimately, what led me to basically a compelling future, which was the first thing that started to turn it around, to started to uplift and move me in forward direction, was I was trying to figure out money and better understand it, and I've had for a while. And so I was reading a lot of books by Gail Vozoskly. She's a Canadian who, some people might know. She did a show called Till Debt Do Us Part, and just has kind of a no bullshit approach to money management. Um, she had been on my radar. I've been interested in learning money since I was 17, also, probably the same time of business. Um, so I was reading her books again, trying to figure out, because I've always been twofold problem. I've never brought a ton of money in, but I also know, because I've read enough, that even if you don't bring a lot of money in, if you can live under those means, you can still leverage that extra money. So I didn't bring a ton in, but I also lived more than I made. So I wasn't living inside my means. So I was trying to figure that out. Of like, okay, can I just manage a little bit of money? But like most things, is it's not that simple. Meaning, it's typically not the thing, right? Um, so even in the beginning of her books, she has these exercises of kind of like dreaming, figuring out wish lists, like essentially personal development stuff of like figuring out what you want in your future, what you want money to buy, that kind of stuff. And in doing a bunch of these exercises, which were actually mind maps, I was doing kind of these big mind maps on some sort of big note paper. I think I had like a big, because I was putting them on my wall by my computer. And once I did, I think I had 3 of them up. I remember kind of looking at them, and she gets you to kind of circle and like figure out what your top 3 things are in each of these. And I remember in all of these different ones, so like what I wish I was doing, what I want to do in the future, what I want to save up for, traveling was in the top 3. And that was the first time in 5 years that I also remembered that actually when I left high school, and I talked about this the other day, when I left high school and changed kind of my path from wanting to pursue acting to business, actually part of the reason, if not the main reason, one of the main reasons was I wanted to travel. I just had something about it. I had it in me. I wanted to explore the world. And so I had decided I would start a business, build it to make money, be successful, and then I could travel the world. Again, I was letting so many things before see, right? I was like, okay, I need to build a business. It needs to be successful, get the resources, then I can travel. That's how I thought I would get there. Well, in the process of entrepreneurship and business and failing business and life, I had forgotten even why I was doing a business in the first place. Until that point, until I was in this dark hole with nothing left and really just trying to like, how the fuck did I get here? And remembering that spark of like, oh, right, the thing I forgot about for 5 years is I just want to travel. So that initially gave me kind of a spark of hope in that darkness. It's like, okay, the future has something for me. It's like, okay, I'm excited for the first time in a while. How do I get there? And so I started just looking at like travel group things and like, okay, how could I, even get a couple $1,000s together to go travel? Part of it was I wanted to escape my life. Like for sure, there was a little bit of desperation of I need to go now because I didn't like I had been struggling in this dark place for months, and the worst of it, the crux wasn't so much the job and everything. It was the binge eating because my emotional state was so devastated because it just like self punishment and like every week I'd feel so shitty and beat myself up, and it's just like that was affecting my mental space and I couldn't break that cycle. I didn't know how to get out of it. And so part of it was kind of the same thing I'm doing for New Zealand, but not not the same kind of reality, but I had an understanding that if I got out of my life, if I got out of my scenario and my situations and my habits and routines, I would give myself some space to then figure something new out or build new. I just knew I needed to kind of break my patterns because I was stuck in this cycle. And so I was figuring out how to do that. Didn't really have an idea. And then an offhanded comment from my dad kind of yelling at me on the phone, understandably, like my parents were basically just helping me survive. He made a comment that like if I couldn't figure it out in Vancouver, then I should go live with them in Creston and work for him. Just they were tired of paying for me, and again, super understandable. And it was kind of this interesting, like in the moment, almost a bit of a threat. Like if you don't figure shit out, you have to come home. But it planted this amazing seed where it's like after the emotional conversation, I don't know exact. It was hours, days. I was just kind of thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, what the fuck am I doing here in Vancouver? Miserable, broke. And again, it was that idea of like, oh, if I get out of this life, out of this situation, into new habits, new routines, it's like I can do that. And because I didn't have the resources to figure out how to travel then, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to like pack up my life and like move home, licking my wounds and like recoup a little bit, but knowing at least I had a goal. So that's what sparked the whole, like that's what made the seed like blossom, is like, okay, fuck business, fuck trying to do this thing that hasn't been working. I'm just gonna move to Creston. I'm gonna find work. I'm gonna work my face off. I'm gonna save up as much money as possible, and I'm gonna go travel, because that's the dream I forgot about for 5 years that I need to go do. And ultimately, that's what happened. Is I, I went to Creston. My dad didn't even have work for me, but I ended up finding work, and I did exactly that. It's what's profound is this time of my life post that darkness is a time I reflect on often, because I executed so well on my goals and my dreams. And even since then, it's been 4 or 5 years, have never had that same determination. I'm tasting it now, actually, which is interesting because it's similar environment, similar goal. So I'm definitely really thinking about this as I'm living it currently. But at that time, like, I was fucking dedicated. Like, I worked 2 jobs. I was working 14-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week. Not 14 days, 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I was working about 14-hour days, 5, 6 days a week, but sometimes because of both jobs, I worked 7 days a week. But I loved it, and I was happy, and I was enthusiastic and energetic, and I remembered like the energy I was putting out every day, even though I was working so hard, was so good because I had a dream, I was working towards it, and I was seeing results. Like every month that my bank account grew, it solidified the dream I was working for. And when I hit 5,000 in savings, it's like I was done. I had accomplished the goal. I knew I was going. I knew I could book my flights. I knew I could go to South America. Now more money just would mean I'd have more options and more availability and more time. And yeah, so that period of my life is, again, something I reflect on often, of just how disciplined I was in doing things that, like, I wasn't necessarily super passionate about the work themselves. Um, there were social environments, which was great. I thrive in social environments. Um, but working at a cafe and a bar is like, it wasn't supporting any kind of grand dream, but it was supporting the dream to go travel. And so I just leveraged that hard. Also, coincidentally, maybe it's the right word, is the time I met Sherry, which I think speaks a lot of volume to the person I was, the energy I was putting off, the state I was in. Like, I was constantly in a place of just feeling amazing and fantastic. Of course, I still had challenges and day-to-day problems, and I was still dealing with health struggles, and still a little bit of the sugar addiction, but much less so. Not the same binge eating patterns. I had broken that. It would come up every now and then. Like, sometimes I would get into the addiction where it's like a little bit fed into more, which fed into more, but it never became a pattern again, which was great. It would just be some odd times. I'd fall down, I'd get back up. Yeah, so it's crazy now, and this is that experience, the darkness, I think gave me a lot of ability now to be more present anytime I find myself in depressive states, to know that there's good in it, that there's a message, that there's something to come out of that. Because it was such a struggle, and because, like, it was the darkest well I've ever been into, but coincidingly, coming out of that set me on a whole new trajectory, and again changed my life. And so now, anytime I've been in a depressive episode since then, I'm much more aware, and I think much more proactive in understanding and sitting with it. And I don't try to avoid it, and I don't try to self-medicate, and I don't try to sweep it under the rug. I really try to sit with it, and often do more personal development work to figure out, okay, what's the thing I'm missing? What's the unlock? Why am I in this state? What do I need to know? And actually, since then, even though I've struggled with depressive episodes, many in the last couple of years, they've always led to a good place, because I'm always asking better questions and always looking for, why am I in this place right now? What is life trying to tell me? Yeah, so I'll wrap it at that. It's a long video. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. We'll continue with the series chronologically, and keep talking about some of the other big life-changing moments. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow.